What does the word freedom mean to you? The ability to direct the course of your life, answering to no one but yourself? Maybe making the choice of who's on your team that you work with? Or when you take time off, when and how long? Sounding good to you? Let's talk about it. This is Prosperity and Something Greater. My guest today is John Leardi. He's a healthcare attorney who has advised many of my top practices members who need the best legal advice they can get, which is how I describe John every single time I recommend him to someone. He's also a principal of Nemo Capital Partners and serves as general counsel. And John has a true zest for life, which you will hear, and has also, you will find out, made some very important decisions using some very clear criteria. He has certainly created his own version of prosperity. I found out when reading his bio that he lives in Freehold, New Jersey, which I did not know. And which, of course, for a Bruce Springsteen fan like me, is really considered to be Holy Land. So straight from his home in the Holy Land, where occasionally his landscapers will swing past his window, John Leardi. Well, hey, everybody, and welcome to the podcast today. This is Rem Jackson, and boy, am I happy to have a friend of mine, an attorney that I know well. And I like attorneys. I like them a lot. I have a daughter that's an attorney, so they become very, very, dear to my heart. And certainly, John, you're right up there. If there's anyone I have to call and say, I need some good advice, my doctors need help, you're the guy we always turn to. And I met you through the American Academy of Podiatric Practice Management, or the AAPPM, and have watched many of your presentations and have always just been so impressed with all of the real information. In fact, before this even airs, you're going to be helping out the top practices members with disaster planning and some thoughts about that, things you'll talk about, how to be prepared. But I always have been impressed with your zest for life and how you just approach all that you do. And so to invite you on to Prosperity and Something Greater to talk about something we never get a chance to talk about is a real delight for me. So welcome, my friend.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Rem. From the moment you asked me, I've been looking forward to this so much. My maiden voyage on a podcast, at least as a participant. I'm an avid listener, of course.
Oh, wow. Well, that's great.
But one thing I'll say is, working with your clients in particular is always enjoyable. It's a group that gets it, and it. That's why they choose to spend so much time with you. But also the various professional entanglements. We tend to meet some pretty interesting folks, and it's been both personally and professionally very, very fulfilling.
Well, great. Let's just jump right in. So, John, the first question I want to ask you is the one I ask everyone, and that is, how do you define prosperity for you?
I think the single word that comes to mind is freedom, or control, perhaps may be a more apt description. That I control my own existence, personally, professionally, etc. I made a decision a long time ago not to work, for example, for a large law firm. My first job out of law school was to work for a very prestigious firm, wonderful people. I have great relationships with many of them today, 15 years later. But a couple months in, it was pretty clear to me that I didn't have any interest in hitching my wagon to somebody else. I wanted to be in control. So to me, everything starts with that, is being able to control my own existence.
Well, I could really relate to that because, and in fact, in episode 1, I talk about the man across the desk and the idea that, not having to have anybody tell me what I can do, when I can do, or how I can do it is to me a major component in prosperity for me. I love it. Freedom, right? It's just freedom to be able to do what you want to do. And with that comes a lot of responsibility to get up in the morning, do the things you do, have that courage. It's the journey of the entrepreneur, which any small business owner, any attorney like yourself, you're the owner of a small business. You're the owner of a larger business too with your role at Nemo Health. But again, you're one of the principals there and you don't get to make all the calls because you work with a group there. But it's just wonderful. I spent 20 years in corporate life. And I always say I thought that was great because I got paid more than I ever thought I would ever earn. I had this retirement account I didn't even know was there. I got this thing in the mail and I'm like, oh, this looks bad. And it turns out it was my money. It wasn't like a bill. I didn't know what it was. And it was this program. And I thought that safety net was so great. And then I really discovered, especially after I took the leap and went out on my own and started Top Practices, that safety net that I thought was really there for me was actually just a cage. And that when you're willing to take the risk of being your own boss and move forward, the benefits and what you get from it all is vastly greater than what you might be perceiving as safety. Because, they can always fire you, right, John?
Oh, sure. And, I have this conversation so often because so many, particularly over the last 5 or 6 years, so many of my physician clients are in a position where they're considering mergers, consolidations, becoming an employee of a hospital or a health system. And, this is a common conversation we'll have is, if I'm going to advise you on that, I really need to know what's important to you. And I know from my perspective, it initially started as freedom. And in a lot of ways, I think it was very financially driven when I was younger. But as I've gotten older and, I got married and I have children now, that freedom extends beyond even just that sort of, risk benefit analysis of being a business owner or an entrepreneur. It also has to do with, I don't want to miss any wrestling matches. I don't want to miss any K1 socials, as one of the parents there. I want to be there. I want to be present while my children are young. I know everybody keeps telling me it's not going to last forever. And I assure you, I figured that out by now. My 2 little babies have turned, 8 and 6 overnight. But, I have this conversation and I'm struck that, and this is, I think, what's so interesting about the idea of talking about prosperity is that everybody defines it differently. What is success or what you hope to achieve or model your professional and personal lives after? It's different. And it comes back to, actually, it's a completely different context, but it was in the sort of the building of a business. Simon Sinek in his noted book, You Start with the Why. I think every conversation about what to do and how to do it should start with, well, what do you want in the end? And so that conversation with doctors about do you become an employee or do you stay on your own, it should start out with, well, what makes you happy? What is, there are some folks that are perhaps like you and I, Rem, that control is number one. There are others that just want to, for example, in the legal context or the physician context, they want to come in and they want to treat patients, or they want to come in and they want a lawyer. They don't want to do all of the other things that comes along with running a business that many of us enjoy, but some don't.
And that's really valid. That is how you approach, your work. And that is as legitimate as everything that we're talking about. And there are trade-offs in both areas. When you have a job like that, then there are some restrictions that you can't make some decisions. I mean, people always say they want to open up their own company so I can set my own hours, which turn out to be 24/7, 7 days a week. And so, it's a trade-off either way. Now, you've addressed this already, John, but was there a defining moment or event that really brought you to that decision that you made that is something you want to share?
I grew up with a father who had had his own business since I was probably 7 or 8 years old. I sort of learned about the struggles of an entrepreneur firsthand by watching him as a child. And then later on, in between undergrad and law school, I actually worked for him for a few years. And he was in a completely different business. So he was in site and utility development, building infrastructure. And actually, we built houses together. before I went to law school. I saw firsthand that, he was at every football game, every wrestling match. I mean, that was sort of ingrained to me as something that I wanted to be able to share with my children one day. It's funny that the two defining moments in my professional life could not be, less anticipated. The first was we're going on almost, it'll be 15 years this year, this October or this fall, that I was actually in the bathroom at a wedding of one of my closest friends who was being married and became my first law partner. And, it was somewhere in between, the end of the cocktail hour and dinner being served. And he asked me if I would consider leaving my job with a firm and a nice salary and all of that and joining him. And he had started a little practice representing chiropractors and a couple of other physician specialties in these payer audits that had just really started to take hold. And so his idea was to start a practice that was built around representing providers in these post-payment audits. And I said yes. And here we are 15 years later, and we are a full-service health law boutique, 3 partners, 5 associates now, and really have exceeded my wildest expectations on that front. And that's the day job. As you referenced earlier, I also took a leap about, let's see now. So it's 2020, so 7 years ago, around this time, when 3 podiatrists, not clients, 2 that I knew from the speaking circuit that you and I referenced before, Practice Management Academy and some other places. And then, so Dr. Frederick and Dr. Juliana, and then Dr. Safadine, who of course practiced in Michigan and knew Dr. Frederick well. The 4 of us hatched a crazy idea to buy an electronic health record platform out of receivership. And here we are 7 years later. And it's the kind of thing that no sane person would have probably done, but it just felt right. And I think in both circumstances, the sort of common theme I can see behind the two, and it goes back to those lessons I learned from my dad, is how important it is to have a true partner. If you're going to be in a partnership, you got to be all in. It's like marriage. And I've got 2 sets of partners that, the trust and the love and the admiration I have for both sets makes partnership easy. As easy as partnership can be, right? So I would say those have to be the 2 defining moments. I've made lots of good moves and bad moves and mistakes and cleaning up mistakes, but really just the decisions to be involved with those 2 ventures, a little guts and probably a lot of luck.
A lot of guts and a lot of luck. I think those both come into play. I had a ringside seat for watching the 4 of you create Nemo Health just for fun. Would you just spend maybe 30 seconds and tell everybody why you named the company Nemo?
Sure. So we were, as I recall, at the Great Lakes Conference in Troy, Michigan, sometime in the February or March. The exact dates escape me. And, we were in the restaurant of the hotel during a break of the conference. And, it was Dr. Safadine and Dr. Frederick, I believe, who floated the idea initially of, hey, have you heard what's going on with TrackNet? We should make a play. I think initially I was dismissive and thought, well, why are they bringing a lawyer into the equation? They probably just need somebody to do the contracts and they don't want to pay for it. But what happened is that this was when Superstorm Nemo hit the East Coast, and Dr. Juliana and I, who were trying to get back to New Jersey, were in fact snowed in Michigan. And with the extra couple of days that we were stranded there, anybody who knows Dr. Safadine can know he is exceptionally persuasive. And by the end of our stay, our extended stay in Troy, Michigan, plan was hatched to make the acquisition. And we thought, well, if we pull this off, we've got to name the company Nemo. There's no way around it. So
thank you. I love that story because I was always like, why Nemo? Because, you think of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, blah, blah, blah. And then when you get the real story, and it's just excellent. They say the hardest ship of all to sail is a partnership. And I think that's very true in so many ways. And the fact that you have done this so successfully twice really speaks well to your judgment, your luck. I guess we'll start with luck, your luck, your judgment. And I think it speaks really well of you that you're doing this and you have this freedom, such a big part, folks, of at least inside yourself to be free of prosperity. So, John, we all have challenges and obstacles that we face. I mean, can you share what you face on your daily journey? What can trip you up?
One thing that I've definitely learned the hard way is overcommitment. You don't want to say no to someone when they need your help. And you don't want to ever tell somebody that they're not a priority and you're going to need to get to them a week from now when your schedule clears up. So I have had a propensity during my career to overcommit. Yes, I can do that. Yes, I'll get back to you. And I will set these arbitrary time frames to complete something or to respond. And invariably, for a very long time, I would fail miserably. So I think that has been a huge, I don't want to say failure, but certainly a shortcoming that I've had to learn how to deal with. The other thing I think that I point out is not a weakness so much as it is something that I'm constantly having to remind myself of is I set a very high level of expectation for myself, not just in terms of, the substantive quality of my work, but even just work ethic, how committed I am. If something needs to get done and I need to pull an all-nighter or I need to work all weekend, I mean, that's what happens when your name is on the door. And sometimes it's unrealistic to expect the same thing from the people who work, particularly younger attorneys or staff that are not necessarily, management level. Compensation doesn't match expectations sometimes. And so I'm consistently having to remind myself that it's not fair to expect everybody to be me, that everybody's different. And what I can do as a leader and as a colleague is to do my best to understand, what makes them tick, what their limitations are, so I can calibrate my expectations accordingly. And to not expect somebody to be something they're not, and not to expect somebody to do it how I want just because that's how I do it. So I think those have been the two things: overcommitment and being unrealistic in my expectations sometimes of others have been two challenges that continue to pop up, today.
On that topic of overcommitting, I have similar kinds of things that I do. I mean, that's the thing. We're all like that. And I think if we can be self-aware enough to know what your issues are, your challenges, and I think you might have used the word maybe weakness, and then build up some structure around you to help support you. Like, one thing is with us, REM used to be the bottleneck in top practices. everything had to be perfect. It had to be just the way I could do it. And I learned, no, it needs to be done and out. The blog or the email or the video that is good, but not perfection, will always outperform the perfect one that has yet to be completed and sent to anyone. So that's the first thing, that I would say. And then the other one you mentioned about, taking care of your people. And it's true. I remember when I worked for folks, I did not appreciate a boss that didn't respect me or my time. That was my time. Because when people work with us and we're paying them, we're making it's a transaction. We're asking for their creativity, their intelligence, their expertise, and their time in exchange for the compensation that we give them. And so I have made it a major goal of my own to never bother anyone at night or on the weekends unless I have to. And then what you find out is, and it's so rare that you have to. You might want to, but you don't have to. And it's very rare that I'll actually text someone, because that's, the most urgent way I think you can get someone. I'll text someone and say, I need your help right now. Can you help? And generally it's when I'm traveling and I'm like, Michelle, help. And, so that's pretty much the one I remember the most. But it's so true that because their name's not on the door, their responsibilities aren't the same. Taxes, they're going to be paid by you and all the rest of it. So couldn't agree with you more. So let me ask you, what's your top strategy that you use really to keep yourself headed in the right direction and not slipping into old habits?
So on the overcommitment issue, what I've started doing is I've allowed myself to take advantage of modern technology. Whereas I used to just keep my entire existence in a series of legal pads on my desk, bring them back and forth between my desk at work and my desk at home. I use OneNote and I keep a running diary of everything I have going on, everything I've delegated out. And it just, I keep copious notes of everything. And when somebody wants to know when I'm going to get to it, I don't immediately respond. I take a pause, almost as though, that strategy we have for not sending smug emails, right? I'll know what I want to say, but I'll take a breath first and I'll say, hey, let me get back to you. I'll send you an email within the hour, or I'll let you know by tomorrow morning when I think I can get to this realistically. I'm not afraid any longer to say no when I can't get to something, when there's a definitive time frame that it's needed. And I'm also not afraid to say when I don't have an answer and that I need some time to think about it and to contemplate it. And I think that's something that's come with self-awareness, but also self-confidence. I mean, when I was a young lawyer and I constantly felt that I was, sort of swimming upstream against folks who were more seasoned, more experienced and smarter and everything, I didn't have the confidence to do and say those things. But now, I'm very comfortable in my own skin.
That's great. I just think that's absolutely great. So, John, the people listening to this podcast, they're interested in achieving their own version of prosperity. And what's the best advice you could share?
That's a difficult question. I think, well, you have to start out by, as we said earlier, you have to define what is prosperity to you. For some, it's money. For some, it's freedom. For some, it's stature. But you have to start out, defining what it is. And then I just don't think that you can proceed willy-nilly. Like there's a lot of people that say just kind of put your nose down, work hard, and good things will happen. I mean, I don't agree with that. I think you have to have a plan, or at least an overarching strategy for how we're going to get there. I mean, my law firm didn't succeed because my partner Vin and I decided we were going to work really hard. I think we succeeded because we found an area of law that was novel and unique. We decided to focus on that and nothing else. We decided to fake it till we make it. We've had an office in the Carnegie Center in Princeton, which is a very prestigious address, for a lot longer than we had the receivables and collections to justify it. And we have had blinders on about what we were going to accomplish. I think similarly with Nemo, yes, it was a risk, but we were coming from the perspective of, my three partners are podiatrists. Who better to empathize with their colleagues over technology and electronic health records than three people who were stuck using the same platform for years before we made the investment? So, I think you can't be afraid to work hard. You can't be afraid to have accountability, but you've also got to have a plan to get where you're going. Admittedly, I'm not a process person. I'm not a business plan kind of guy. And I realize that in my two businesses and, my firm and with Nemo, there's other people to help put that puzzle together for me. But I'm a 36,000 foot level. This is where we're going. Somebody tell me how we're going to get there, and keep everything focused on that. And I think that's so, so important. You can't just fly by the seat of your pants anymore.
That's great. An old icebreaker that I had somebody use years ago, and I enjoyed it. I've asked everybody this question, and it's turned out to be just generally pretty good. We'll see if you're any good with your answer. But if you were a toy, any toy at all, what would it be and why?
Wow. I think I'd want to be a Lego or a set of Legos. And the reason for that is you can always reinvent yourself when you're a Lego set. Yes, there is that mold that you were supposed to be, but everybody who comes and takes that same group of toys, it's their imagination that's going to turn it into perhaps something else. And it's probably the big softy in me of watching my 6-year-old play Legos like 24 hours a day. And just even last night, we got him a set that was like, a ship within a bottle. And, yeah, he did it the first time the way the instructions said. He'll put it together 3 more times. It'll be a little different each time, maybe a little bit better. So I like the idea that you can reinvent yourself, that you don't have to be sort of the cookie cutter, that maybe you set out to be or that you thought you needed to be. So I like the idea of Legos.
I love that. And literally in a pad right in front of me, there's the words reinvent top practices. I try to do that all the time because nothing's the same, nothing's static. We need to all be reinventing ourselves, especially when we've been at this now for 13 years at Top Practices. Where are we going next? I want to be out ahead and help everybody get there. I don't want to say, oh, that's where you folks went. So reinvention is, I think that's a great toy. Good job. I have 100% streak still. So last question, my friend, and I'm going to make you just give me one, but if you could recommend one book that we should all read, what would it be?
Wow. I'm going to say start with the why. I mentioned it earlier, Simon Sinek. And he's had several other great books as well, but that was a game changer for me because it really allowed me to realize that the singular focus and the singular goal in any successful business has to be pointed on sort of not the next shiny object or the functionality of how you're going to get to what that end result is, but what's the overriding purpose of why you do what you do? And it led directly to us changing all of our marketing and our web presence for our law firm. We made it focused on, what we were trying to accomplish, not what we do, right? We facilitate healthcare, reimbursement, access, and availability, right? It's not about we do great contracts or, we litigate cases very effectively. It was about what's the end result? At the end of the day, what are we hoping to achieve? And I think the same thing, with Nemo. I don't know that everybody necessarily read the book and had the same opinion, but we decided that we wanted to help private practitioners survive and have the option to stay in private practice if they so choose. TrackNet is not a platform for hospital systems and multi-specialty groups or anything like that. It's for the private practitioner podiatrist. And so everything that we've built around the platform was to accomplish that goal of allowing them to choose how they want to practice. And if it's continue to be independent, that's what it's there. So, I think that's why I would point to that book, because how we've built both businesses really almost started from some of the key points of that book.
In Top Practices, we run a goal setting and business development workshop all summer long. Because in my opinion, the best time to do your goals is in the summer. It's counterintuitive. Most people are like, I'm taking the summer off. No, just add this to it. And, it won't overtake your summer by any means. And then in the fall, instead of thinking, I got to really start thinking about these goals, you're locked and you're ready, you're set. And you can celebrate on New Year's Eve because you know what's coming up in the next year because you did it all at the summertime. Our very first module is Start with Why, and it's 100% Simon Sinek. It's absolutely where I learned that. Without the why, you're not going to put up with the day-to-day routine and trials and tribulations if the why isn't always driving you. Every morning I wake up and I think, it's going to be a really great day today. And that's my goal, is to live that day. And you don't know why, then you can't even really get started. So this has been delightful. John, thanks so much. I really appreciate you taking the time. I know you're busy. Thanks so much for being with us.
Rem, I really enjoyed it. Thanks so much for having me.
Okay, bye-bye. Just like Jaber Crow, Wendell Berry's barber that I mentioned in episode 1, you heard John, and he's put a high priority on not having to deal with the man on the other side of the desk in his life. And it's one road to prosperity and one I personally really value. I love going to bed at night knowing I'm driving my life. And it wasn't always that way for me. 20 years it wasn't that way for me. And now I would never give it up. Prosperity, flourishing and thriving, being the captain of your own ship, living life on your terms. Sounds exactly like a piece of prosperity to me. How about you? Let me know what you think. You can send me an email at rem@toppractices.com. Prosperity is the entire focus of Top Practices. Most of our doctors are struggling with the business of medicine, and those that aren't truly understand that through association with other successful practitioners, they can take their success to the next level or something even greater, like prosperity. Prosperity in business is a function of mindset, marketing, and management. And that is our mission at Top Practices. You can find out more about Top Practices, our marketing and management programs for doctors, our workshops and annual summit at toppractices.com. Until next time, this is Rem Jackson. Smile when you wake up, and then have a really good day. Nothing is more important.